When it comes to influential creators in the world of comics, there are very few that have left the long-lasting legacy of Stan Lee, the architect and co-creator of so many of Marvel's most popular and long-lasting characters. Lee's contributions, working alongside the likes of Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Bill Everett and Don Heck, genuinely cannot be understated, with his characters and ideas shaping the very way we see superheroes and in particular Marvel Comics. Which makes it all the more strange for me to tell you about the time that Lee not only went to work for the arch enemy DC Comics, but created his own unique take on the DC universe. So in this video, we're going back to 2001 and examining a 13-issue miniseries entitled Just Imagine, which saw the Marvel Comics legend trade red for blue and rebuild the likes of Batman, Superman and Wonder Woman in his own unique image. How could this actually happen? It's honestly an understatement to call Stan Lee a Marvel icon at this point. The writer had been with the company since 1939. In fact, he was the company's third ever employee, standing by them throughout the dark times of the 1950s and bringing the company to the highest point of the industry throughout the 1960s and beyond. At this point, Stan Lee is nothing short of the public face of Marvel Comics, so the very idea of him working for DC Comics sounds so surreal. And yet, it happened. And in a way, it was all thanks to a rather unlikely source, former DC Comics writer and Batman film producer Michael Uslan, and a chance conversation at the 1989 Batman film premiere, as Reed took a note in his book Slugfest. While at the film's June 1989 premiere, Lee and Batman co-creator Bob Kane had been good-naturedly ribbing each other about their various successes, with Lee insisting Batman would have been more successful if he'd had a hand in it, and Kane claiming Spider-Man would have been more successful if he had drawn it. The argument got Uslan thinking, what would Batman have been like if Lee had created him? This fascinating idea, born out of a somewhat simple exchange in the late 1980s, remained on the back burner for a number of years. That is, until Marvel filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1996. As former Marvel Executive Vice President Cheryl Rhodes explained, the reason Stan was able to go over to DC was because Perlmutter decided to save money. When I was there, I was paying Stan $1 million a year, and I had it on good authority that Perelman's people were paying him a separate $1 million a year that wasn't on our books. Perlmutter cancelled the contract to save money. While Lee had formally stepped down from his regular Marvel duties earlier in the decade, Stan remained on Marvel's payroll as Chairman Emeritus. However, with Marvel's troubled financial situation at the time, the company felt like they could no longer justify the legendary creator's salary. And so, for the first time since 1939, Stan Lee was free to work with any company he wanted. Upon hearing this news, Uslan contacted Lee and reminded him of the pitch they had discussed years prior, telling Stan that it'd be great to see how he would have approached creating many of DC's long-established heroes. Lee, flattered by Uslan's idea, replied by saying, "Hell, of course it would be interesting to do, but I have as much chance of doing those characters as a snowball in hell." Even Stan himself didn't think there was ever a chance that he'd work for DC. But after Uslan went and pitched the idea to DC executives, the company formally offered Lee the chance to come and work for DC Comics, writing a 13-issue series wherein each issue would be a retelling of a different DC character in his own image. DC even offered Lee $1 million to do the series, and with that, hell had frozen over, and a snowball rolled through it. Stan Lee was about to make the DC universe his own. The idea behind this 13-issue series was for Stan Lee to reimagine the most popular heroes of the DC universe, recreate them from the ground up in the same way he did with so many beloved characters at Marvel. To help accomplish this, DC teamed Lee up with a number of incredibly talented artists, each who would help bring a different character to life, namely Jim Lee, who worked on Wonder Woman, Dave Gibbons, who worked on Green Lantern, and John Byrne, who co-created Lee's new take on Robin. And to say that Lee's reinventions of these characters were unique is certainly an understatement. The first issue of Just Imagine, released September 2001, introduces us to Lee and Joe Kubert's new take on Batman. Now named Wayne Williams, this Caped Crusader was an African-American vigilante, seeking revenge for the death of his former police officer father. Likewise, October's issue introduced us to Wonder Woman, real name Maria Mendoza, a political activist who gains the powers of the Incan sun god after finding the staff of Manco Capac. Superman's reinvention, created alongside John Buscema, depicts the Man of Tomorrow as a member of the Kryptonian police force, stranded on Earth until he can repair the alien technology he needs to return home. Just by examining the Trinity itself, we can clearly see just how Lee was rebuilding these characters from the ground up, taking a handful of the essential elements and remixing them with his own ideas into something very new. And while these new versions of the DC heroes would never replace the long-standing originals, I do find it quite interesting to look at these different versions. Some of Lee's more intriguing reinventions, though, come in the form of characters like the Flash, now depicted as a teenage girl with a life-threatening illness that drains her energy, injected with the DNA of a hummingbird and given super speed. Similarly, Lee and John Byrne's new take on Robin is an interesting deviation from the norm, with this version being a teenage assassin working for the villainous Reverend Dominic Dark, the overarching antagonist of the entire series. At the halfway point of this 13-issue run, Lee and Jerry Ordway put together their version of the Justice League, a team consisting of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash and Green Lantern. But it's in the final issue of Just Imagine where Lee's unique vision comes full circle. Issue 13, released in September 2002, is titled Just Imagine Crisis, and sees the JLA and the other heroes of this universe team up to fight a world-eating entity known as the Crisis, named after DC Comics' most infamous event. During this, it's actually revealed that Robin is the grandson of Crisis, betraying the heroes and absorbing himself into the entity. However, when Wonder Woman attempts to stop this by pulling Robin out of Crisis, he is imbued by a mixture of Crisis's purple energy and the green energy from the Earth, also the source of Green Lantern's powers, transforming the former Hitman into a godlike being known as Atom. Atom uses his immense power to dissolve Crisis out of existence and end the threat he posed to the universe. In the aftermath of this story, the surviving heroes unite and form a new group, known as the Justice League for All, and working together as superheroes to defend their Earth against any threats that may arise. Following the 13-issue run, Lee's Just Imagine series almost became forgotten about. Besides an appearance in Grant Morrison's 2014 series Multiversity and several cameo appearances in 2015's Convergence, the heroes of Just Imagine have barely featured outside of Lee's original comics. It's worth noting that the critical reception to this series was for the most part mixed, with some enjoying the spectacle of the former Marvel Comics icon now plying his trade at DC, while others found the stories themselves to be largely underwhelming. Even some within DC actually felt this, with former editor Joan Hilty noting that it was a stunt, frankly. There was nothing organic about Stan Lee imagining Aquaman. We thought it was strange around the office. It was a fun, brief idea, but I don't know exactly what the motive was. I think you could argue that it did have the effect of subconsciously saying to the editors, your ideas aren't good enough, we need Stan Lee. The general consensus seems to be that while it was a fun opportunity for both Lee and DC Comics to work together, the end product itself didn't quite live up to the very idea of it. It's also unsurprising to hear that Marvel were largely unhappy with this series ever taking place, with the company quickly drafting a new contract to stop the public face from being able to work with DC Comics. But it turns out that it wasn't just the bad PR that made the Marvel executives realise they needed to keep Stan Lee around. As Cheryl Rhodes explains how Marvel realised that Stan's contract implied that his employment gave Marvel rights to the characters he created. So by cancelling the contract, there was a legal argument that the characters reverted to Stan, keen to not see this loophole be exploited, Stan Lee returned to Marvel in 2005, where he remained as the public face and chairman emeritus until his death in November 2018. Today, Lee's legacy as a cornerstone of the comic book world is undisputed, with his contributions to Marvel going far deeper than just the characters he helped create. His style and DNA is so ingrained into the very idea of what Marvel Comics is, and what superhero stories as a whole should be still today. And while obviously Lee's legacy will always be associated with Marvel, it's interesting to go back and look at this seemingly forgotten period where he went to work for DC Comics and offered his unique take on their most beloved and well-known characters. While the stories themselves may not have been revolutionary, the sheer spectacle of them alone makes it strange that they've almost been lost to time. And I think, if nothing else, this video might encourage people to go back and check out the Just Imagine series, and peer into a strange alternate world where the heroes of DC Comics were brought to life by the legendary Stan Lee. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on the video and leave a comment down below as well. Let me know your thoughts on Stan Lee's Just Imagine series. Have you read any of these comics? And what are your thoughts on the history of Stan Lee going to DC and making these 13 single issues? Let me know down in the comments. I can't wait to hear what you have to say as always. If you're new to Owen Likes Comics though, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the notify bell so you don't miss any videos we make, and there should be some other videos on screen right now that you might also enjoy if you happen to enjoy this one. If you want some more of me, you can follow me on Twitter just at Owen Likes Comics, and if you want to help support the channel, there will be a link on screen right now to the Owen Likes Comics Patreon, so please do check that out. But that's all for me. I will see you all next time, so until then, take care and keep reading.